I heard them before I saw them, their voices filtering through the hospital room door, left slightly ajar. My 3 children huddled in the hallway, whispering about my possessions as if I were already dead. The beach house should fetch at least $2 million in this market. Daniel's voice, always calculating, always precise. My oldest, the financial advisor, who measured life in portfolios and profit margins. What about Mom's jewelry? That sapphire set Dad gave her for their 30th anniversary must be worth something, Vanessa chimed in. My daughter, who once had such a tender heart before ambition, hardened it. I've already contacted a buyer for the art collection, Robert added, my youngest always following his siblings' lead. We should move quickly before the market shifts. My eyelids felt like they were weighted with stones, but somehow I forced them open. The sterile ceiling of the hospital room came into focus, followed by the steady beeping of monitors that had apparently been my only faithful companions. These past, how long had it been? Days, weeks. The last thing I remembered was reaching for my reading glasses, a sudden crushing pressure in my chest, the world tilting sideways. Then darkness. Now I lay motionless, breath shallow as my children divided my life while machines confirmed I still had one. What about her personal things, Vanessa, again? The photo albums, Dad's letters storage unit. Daniel replied dismissively. We can sort through it later or just toss it. Nobody wants that sentimental junk. Sentimental junk. 68 years of memories reduced to junk by my own son. The realtor's meeting me at the beach house tomorrow, Robert said. She thinks we can close by the end of the month if we price it aggressively. The beach house, my sanctuary. The place where I'd watched sunsets with Richard before cancer took him 5 years ago. The place where my grandchildren had built sandcastles and collected shells. The place that held so many secrets. My children knew nothing about. A nurse entered then, efficient in her blue scrubs, checking the monitors beside my bed. She glanced toward the door. Your children still here. Mrs. Sullivan. Should I tell them you're showing signs of improvement? I managed the slightest shake of my head, a movement so small it was barely perceptible. The nurse leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You can hear them, can't you? Planning already. She adjusted my IV with gentle hands. Happens more often than you'd think. Families get ahead of themselves. Ahead of themselves. Such a polite way of saying my children were vultures circling, too impatient to wait for my actual death before picking my life apart. Your vitals are stronger today, the nurse continued, making notes on her tablet. Dr. Patel will be pleased. He said you were a fighter from the start. A fighter. Yes, I had been once, when Richard got sick, when money was tight, during the early years when I had to make impossible choices. When had my children forgotten that? The door opened fully and Daniel stepped in, startled to find the nurse at my bedside. Any change he asked, his voice shifting to the concerned son he showed the world. Your mother's condition is stabilizing, the nurse replied. These things take time, but there are positive signs. Daniel nodded solemnly, playing his part. We're just discussing some practical matters. Mom was never good with finances or planning. Dad always handled everything. The lie slid so easily from his lips. Richard had been the dreamer, the big picture thinker. I had been the practical one, managing our household budget through lean times, making $1 stretch into $2. I understand, the nurse said, though her tone suggested she didn't. Just remember, stroke recovery can be unpredictable. Many patients regain more function than initially expected. Of course, Daniel replied, not quite hiding his disappointment. We're just being prepared. Mom would want that. No, what I wanted was for my children to remember who I was, not just Richard's wife or their mother, but Victoria Sullivan, a woman who had made her own quiet marks on the world. After the nurse left, Daniel lingered by my bed, studying me with detached interest, like an appraiser evaluating an antique. We're taking care of everything, Mom, he said, perhaps noting the slight flutter of my eyelids. You don't need to worry about a thing. My tongue felt leaden, useless. I wanted to scream, to grab his expensive tie and pull him close enough to see the life still burning in my eyes. Instead, I lay silent, imprisoned in my failing body. He patted my hand awkwardly. The beach house, your condo, all the financial loose ends. We're handling it all just like Dad would have wanted, just like Richard would have wanted. My husband, who made me promise that some things were sacred, that some promises transcended even family, if only Daniel knew the truth. Daniel left shortly after rejoining his siblings in the hallway. Their voices faded as they walked away, already discussing what furniture was worth keeping and what should be sold. Alone in my hospital room, I felt something beyond the physical pain of my stroke, a deep, searing betrayal that hurt worse than any medical condition. My children couldn't even wait until I was cold before erasing me from my own life. I closed my eyes, conserving what little strength I had. The beach house. I needed to warn someone, needed to protect what wasn't mine to lose, what wasn't theirs to sell. My fingers twitched slightly against the white hospital sheet, and I focused all my energy on that small movement. The nurse had called me a fighter. She had no idea how right she was. That night, as moonlight filtered through the Venetian blinds, casting prison bar shadows across my bed, I made a decision. I would not rage against my children's betrayal. I would not break down in hurt and disappointment. I would teach them a lesson they would never forget. 3 days later, as feeling gradually returned to my left side and words began to form again on my lips, I heard Vanessa in the hallway phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, we're proceeding with the sale," she was saying. "The paperwork's already being processed. No, there's no recovery expected. The doctors say even if she wakes up, she'll never be the same." A lie, doctor. Patel had just that morning told me I was making remarkable progress, that with therapy I could regain most of my function. "The beach house closes next week," Vanessa continued. "Daniel's handling Mom's accounts. Yes, we're being smart about it. Pre-inheritance planning, the attorney called it. Pre-inheritance planning, such a clinical term for theft." I closed my eyes, feigning sleep as she entered the room. I wasn't ready yet. I needed more strength, more time to formulate my response. But time was running out for the beach house, for the promise I had made years ago that my children knew nothing about. The next morning, when my physical therapist asked me to try speaking again, I focused every ounce of my will on forming one critical sentence. I need to make a call. If this story of family betrayal and hidden secrets has captivated you, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. What is Victoria hiding about the beach house? Will she recover in time to stop her children's betrayal? The journey has just begun. I need to make a call. The physical therapist, Jenny, paused mid-stretch of my arm, surprise flickering across her face. These were my first coherent words since the stroke. "Mrs. Sullivan, that's wonderful progress." She smiled warmly. "Who would you like to call?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry from disuse. "My lawyer." Jenny's eyebrows rose slightly. "Your lawyer, not your children?" I managed a small, deliberate shake of my head. "Lawyer important, I understand." Something in her expression told me she did. Perhaps she'd overheard my children's conversations too. "Let me check with Dr. Patel about phone use and we'll make it happen." 2 hours later, after Dr. Amb, Patel had examined me and expressed pleased surprise at my progress. Jenny returned with a hospital phone. "Your doctor approved a short call," she said, positioning the phone against my ear while holding it for me. "Do you remember the number?" I did. I'd memorized Harold Winter's number decades ago when he'd first helped Richard and me draft our wills. My fingers couldn't manage dialing yet, so Jenny input the number as I laboriously recited each digit. Harold answered on the third ring. "Winter's Legal Associates." "Harold," I managed my voice a rasp. "Victoria Sullivan," a pause. "Victoria, my God, I heard you were unresponsive." "Are you all right, Stroke?" I confirmed. "Getting better. Need help emergency." "Of course, anything." He replied immediately. His voice softened. "I've known you and Richard for 30 years. Whatever you need." "Beach house," I whispered, each word an effort. "My children selling it. The Malibu property." Harold sounded concerned. "I see this is serious." "They don't know." I continued, pausing between words to gather strength. "Need to stop them. Important, call this number." I slowly recited a phone number that Harold would find nowhere in my official records. "I'll handle it immediately," Harold assured me. "And Victoria, do you want me to inform your children of your improvement?" I considered this carefully. If they knew I was regaining speech and mobility, they might accelerate their plans. No, let me surprise them. I could almost hear Harold smile through the phone. Understood. I'll visit tomorrow with some papers for you. Rest now. After Jenny took the phone away, I closed my eyes, exhaustion washing over me. The effort of speaking had drained what little energy I had, but a small sense of triumph burned in my chest. The first countermove had been made. The next day brought not only Harold to my room, but also my granddaughter Lily. Her chestnut hair pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Grandma, she breathed, rushing to my bedside and carefully taking my hand. They told us you might never wake up properly, that you might not recognize us. I squeezed her fingers weakly. No, you, I whispered. My Lily. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I've been coming every day, but you were always sleeping. The nurses said you needed rest. I hadn't known she'd been visiting. My treacherous children had never mentioned it. Harold cleared his throat gently. Lily was concerned about some of the decisions being made, Victoria. She contacted me independently yesterday. I looked at my granddaughter with new appreciation. Smart girl. Lily bit her lip. Mom and the uncles are selling everything, Grandma. The beach house is already in escrow. They're having an estate sale at your condo next weekend. Her voice broke. They're even selling Grandpa's record collection and your first edition books. The pain of this betrayal was physical, a tightness in my chest that the monitors quickly detected, sending my heart rate climbing. It's not right, Lily continued, anger now threading through her words. They act like you're already gone, like your things don't matter, like your wishes don't matter. Harold stepped closer. Victoria, I've contacted the number you gave me. The gentleman was quite concerned. He's flying in tomorrow. A wave of relief washed over me. He was coming. Good Lily, I whispered, an idea forming. Need your help? She leaned closer. Anything, Grandma. Pretend you don't know I'm awake. Watch them report back. Harold looked concerned. Victoria, perhaps a more direct approach. I shook my head firmly. Want to know how far they'll go? Lily nodded, determination hardening her features. I'll keep visiting you secretly. They barely notice what I do anyway. One more thing, I added, my voice strengthening slightly with practice. Need cell phone private. Harold reached into his briefcase. I anticipated that. He produced a simple smartphone. It's already programmed with my number, Lily's, and the contact you requested. Basic functions, only large text for easier reading. Lily took the phone, showing me how to use the voice command feature that would compensate for my still clumsy fingers. I'll hide it in your water pitcher drawer when I leave, she whispered. The nurses never look there. As they prepared to leave, Harold paused. Victoria, there's something else you should know. Daniel has been asking questions at the county records office. Apparently, there's something unusual about the beach house title that's delaying the sale. A small smile tugged at my lips, so they were discovering that things weren't as straightforward as they'd assumed. Good, I whispered. After they left, I lay back against the pillows, mental fatigue overwhelming me. The physical effects of the stroke were challenging enough, but this betrayal by my own children cut deeper than any medical condition. I drifted into an uneasy sleep, dreams filled with fragmented memories. A promise made years ago, Richard nodding his approval as I signed papers. The beach house keys being placed in hands that weren't my children's. Mrs. Sullivan, you have visitors. The nurse's voice pulled me from sleep. I opened my eyes to find all three of my children standing at the foot of my bed, their expressions a carefully composed mixture of concern and solemnity. She looks better today, Vanessa observed, clinically more color. The doctor says these fluctuations are normal, Daniel replied. It doesn't indicate actual improvement. I kept my face slack, my eyes unfocused, playing the role of the semi-conscious patient they expected. Through barely open lids, I studied them. Daniel in his tailored suit, checking his watch impatiently. Vanessa scrolling through her phone between performative glances at me. Robert shifting uncomfortably, the only one showing a hint of genuine distress. Mom, Daniel said loudly, as if volume could penetrate brain damage. We're taking care of everything. The house is being sold to a lovely family. They have children who will enjoy the beach just like we did. Liar. The lovely family was undoubtedly one of the real estate development companies that had been trying to acquire oceanfront properties in that area for years. "We've also arranged for your things to be properly handled," Vanessa added. "Some items will go to family members who will treasure them." By family members, she meant herself, I was certain. Vanessa had always coveted my jewelry, especially the pieces Richard had given me. Robert finally spoke, his voice softer than his siblings. "Mom, if you can hear me, I hope we're doing what you'd want." A flicker of doubt in his tone. Perhaps there was still hope for my youngest. They stayed only 15 minutes, their obligation fulfilled. As they filed out, I heard Daniel's phone ring in the hallway. "What do you mean there's a problem with the title?" His voice rose in frustration. "That's impossible. My parents owned that house for 30 years. I smiled faintly as their voices faded. The wheels of justice were beginning to turn. The next morning I awoke to find a text message on my hidden phone. "Arrived in LA, meeting with Harold first. We'll come to hospital this afternoon. Stay strong, David." David. Just seeing his name brought comfort like a life raft in the stormy sea my life had become. My children didn't know about him, had never bothered to learn about the promises I'd kept beyond our immediate family circle. Jenny arrived for my physical therapy session, her cheerful energy a welcome distraction from my troubled thoughts. "You're doing remarkably well, Mrs. Sullivan," she observed, as I successfully lifted my right arm above my head. "Dr. Patel says you're progressing faster than expected." "Motivated," I replied, finding it easier to form single words than complete sentences. "I can see that." Jenny helped me sit up on the edge of the bed. "Is it the house? I couldn't help overhearing your son in the hallway yesterday. He seemed upset about some property title." I nodded, grateful for her perceptiveness. "Beach house, not what they think." Jenny smiled conspiratorially. "Good for you having a few secrets up your sleeve. Nothing wrong with surprising those who underestimate you." We worked for an hour on basic movements, sitting unassisted, gripping objects, even a few tentative steps with a walker. By the end, I was exhausted but triumphant. I was regaining control of my body piece by painful piece. After lunch, Lily texted Mom and Uncle Daniel having emergency meeting with their lawyer. Something about complications with the title search. Uncle Robert looking worried. "We'll update later." I smiled at the phone screen. My children were discovering that their hasty property grab wasn't going as smoothly as planned. The title search would have revealed what they never suspected, that the beach house wasn't legally mine to sell. It hadn't been for 8 years. At precisely 3 o'clock, there was a soft knock at my door. When it opened, my heart swelled at the sight of the young man standing there. Medical textbooks tucked under one arm, dark circles under his kind eyes suggesting he'd come straight from an overnight flight. "Victoria David Mitchell," said softly, crossing the room to take my hand. I came as soon as I heard. I squeezed his fingers, tears welling in my eyes. "David, thank you." He pulled a chair close to my bedside, setting his books aside. At 28, he looked so much like his mother. Sarah's same thoughtful eyes, the same determined set to his jaw. But there was something of his father, too. In the gentle way he held my hand, careful of the IV line. "Harold told me what's happening," he said, his voice low with controlled anger. "Your children are selling the beach house, my beach house." I nodded, relief washing through me that he was here, that I wasn't fighting this battle alone. "They don't know," I managed to explain. "Never told them that you gave me the house after Mom died." David shook his head in disbelief. "That it's been in my name for 8 years. How could they not know Richard and I decided better that way?" It was exhausting to speak, but I needed David to understand. Kids already. "Resented money. We gave your mother for your education." David's face softened with old pain. "I remember the arguments when they found out you were helping pay my medical school tuition. They never understood," I whispered. "Sarah was like sister to me, promised her I'd help you, and you did." David's voice cracked slightly more than help. "You gave me security, a future. That house is the only real asset I have. It's what allowed me to focus on my residency, instead of worrying about debt like my classmates." I nodded, remembering the day Richard and I had made the decision. Our children had been furious when they discovered we were wasting family money helping Sarah with David's education after her cancer diagnosis. They'd never understood the depth of my friendship with Sarah, how we'd been there for each other through everything. My early miscarriages, her divorce, my children's difficult teenage years, her cancer battle. When Sarah died, I'd promised to see David through medical school. Richard and I had discussed it at length, concerned about our own children's increasing materialism. The beach house solution had been Richard's idea. Put it in David's name, let him use it as collateral if needed, ensure he had security while pursuing his dream of becoming a doctor like his father. We'd keep using it as a family, but the ownership would protect both David and the property from our children's growing sense of entitlement. "What are you going to do?" David asked, bringing me back to the present. I smiled faintly. "Watch them discover. They can't sell. What isn't theirs?" "The realtor called me yesterday," David said. "Apparently my name came up on the title search. She was very confused." "Daniel will be more than confused," I replied, a hint of my old spark returning. "He'll be furious." As if summoned by our conversation, the door burst open. Daniel stood there, his normally composed face flushed with anger, a folder clutched in his hand. Behind him hovered Robert, looking uncomfortable, and a woman I didn't recognize, likely their lawyer. "Mom," Daniel snapped, forgetting in his anger that he supposedly believed me unresponsive. "What the hell is going on with the beach house?" His eyes then registered David sitting beside me, and confusion crossed his face. "Who are you?" David stood extending his hand professionally. "David Mitchell." "I believe you're trying to sell my house." Daniel ignored the outstretched hand. "Your house." "That's ridiculous. That beach house has been in our family for decades. And 8 years ago, your mother and father transferred ownership to me," David replied calmly. "Completely legal, properly documented, and registered with the county." The lawyer stepped forward. "Mr. Sullivan, perhaps we should discuss this outside." "No," Daniel cut her off. "I want to hear from Mom." "Mom, can you hear me? Did you give our beach house away to this stranger?" I looked directly at my son, abandoning the pretense of semi-consciousness. "Not stranger," I said clearly. "David, Sarah's son." Daniel's face went slack with shock, whether from hearing me speak or from my confirmation of David's claim, I couldn't tell. Robert moved closer to the bed. "Mom, you're awake. You understand us." I nodded slowly. "Everything heard. Everything selling my things, dividing while I'm still alive." Robert had the grace to look ashamed, his gaze dropping to the floor. Daniel, however, recovered quickly. "Mom, you're confused. The stroke has affected your memory. We're just managing your affairs while you recover. As for this beach house situation, there's clearly been some mistake." "No mistake." I interrupted, each word stronger than the last. "David owns house. My decision, Richard's decision." 8 years ago, the lawyer cleared her throat. "I've reviewed the documentation, Mr. Sullivan. The title transfer appears completely legitimate. Your mother and father transferred ownership to Mr. Mitchell in 2017, retaining lifetime usage rights." Daniel's face contorted with rage. "This is absurd. Why would they give our family vacation home to some charity case?" David stiffened beside me, but maintained his composure. "I'm hardly a charity case, Mr. Sullivan. I'm a surgical resident at Massachusetts General, and your parents had their reasons which they were kind enough to share with me, if not with you." "Get out," Daniel snapped. "This is a family matter." "Actually," David replied, "since it concerns my property, I believe I have every right to be here." The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Patel, who took in the tense scene with a frown. "What's going on here? Mrs. Sullivan needs rest, not distress. Her blood pressure is already elevated." "We're leaving," Robert said quickly, taking his brother's arm. "We'll continue this discussion later." As they turned to go, Daniel looked back at me, betrayal and calculation warring in his eyes. "This isn't over, Mom. Whatever you think you did with that house, we'll fix it." After they left, Dr. Patel checked my vitals, his expression concerned. "Try to avoid excitement, Mrs. Sullivan. Your recovery is progressing well, but stress can cause setbacks." When we were alone again, David sank back into the chair beside me. That went about as expected. Worse to come, I predicted feeling strangely energized despite the confrontation. "Wait until they learn about rest of it." David raised an eyebrow. "The monthly payments, the trust fund conditions?" I nodded everything. "They don't deserve your protection," David said softly. "Not after how they've behaved." Not protecting them, I clarified. Teaching them lesson, long overdue. As the afternoon sun slanted through the hospital blinds, casting golden light across the sterile room, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. My children needed to learn that there were consequences to their actions, that the world didn't revolve around their expectations and desires. And I would be the one to teach them one painful revelation at a time. News travels quickly in families, especially when inheritance is involved. By evening, Vanessa had stormed into my hospital room, designer handbag swinging wildly, face flushed with indignation. "What is this insanity about the beach house?" she demanded without preamble. "Daniel says you gave it away to a stranger." David had stepped out for coffee, leaving me momentarily alone, a fortunate timing that spared us another immediate confrontation. "Not stranger," I replied, finding my voice stronger after a day of practice. "David, Sarah's son, your friend's kid?" Vanessa's voice rose incredulously. "The one you wasted all that money on for medical school, Mom. Have you lost your mind?" I regarded my daughter calmly. At 42, Vanessa had her father's striking features, but none of his compassion. Somewhere between the private schools and country clubs, she'd lost the gentle heart I once knew. My money, I reminded her my choice. It wasn't just your money, it was our family legacy. Dad worked his entire life building that portfolio, and you've been giving it away to people who aren't even related to us. I shook my head slowly. Sarah was family not by blood, by choice. "Choice!" Vanessa scoffed. "We're your actual family, your children, your flesh and blood, and you've betrayed us for some random kid." The door opened and Lily slipped in. Freezing when she saw her mother. I hadn't expected her. She usually came in the mornings when her mother was at yoga. Mom Lily looked between us, quickly assessing the situation. "I just came to bring Grandma some decent food. The hospital stuff is terrible." Vanessa turned on her daughter. "Did you know about this?" "About the beach house?" Lily's face remained impressively neutral. "Know what? That your grandmother gave away our beach house years ago to her friend's son, that charming vacation home that should have been part of your inheritance someday. Gone." I watched my granddaughter carefully. We hadn't discussed this specific detail during her visits. Lily hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "I knew Grandma helped David Mitchell with medical school. She told me about it last year when I was considering pre-med. This was news to me." Lily had never mentioned interest in medicine. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "You've been talking to her about this? Behind our backs?" "Not behind anyone's back," Lily replied evenly. "I just asked her for advice about my future, something you and Dad never seemed to have time for." The barb hit home and Vanessa flinched slightly before recovering. "We're getting off track. The point is, your grandmother has made a terrible mistake, possibly due to her condition. We're going to fix it." "Nothing to fix," I interjected. "Legal proper my decision, a decision you never discussed with your own children." Vanessa's voice cracked with emotion, the first genuine feeling I'd heard from her in days. "Would you have understood?" I asked softly. "You never gave us the chance," she replied. And for a moment beneath the anger, I glimpsed hurt, real hurt. Perhaps I had misjudged. Perhaps underneath the materialism and entitlement, my children genuinely felt betrayed by my secrecy, not just deprived of an asset. The moment passed quickly. Vanessa straightened, smoothing her immaculate blouse. "It doesn't matter. Daniel's already consulting with another attorney. There must be grounds to challenge this. Diminished capacity, undue influence something." And just like that, any sympathy I'd felt evaporated. Not a word about my recovery, about how I was feeling, about what I might need. Only strategies to undo my decisions and claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. "Good luck," I said simply. The door opened again, and David entered with 2 coffee cups. He stopped short at the sight of Vanessa, his expression carefully neutral. "I didn't realize you had company. I can come back." "No need," Vanessa said coldly, gathering her purse. "I was just leaving." She turned to me, eyes hard. "This conversation isn't over, Mom." After she left, Lily exhaled shakily. "That was intense." David handed me one of the coffee cups, which I accepted gratefully. "Your mother, I presume?" he asked Lily. She nodded. That was one of her more restrained performances, believe it or not. I took a careful sip of the coffee, my first since the stroke, rich and revitalizing. Lily interested in medicine, I told David. He turned to my granddaughter with genuine interest. Really? What specialty? Lily blushed slightly. I'm just exploring options, but possibly pediatrics or geriatrics. I like working with people who actually need help. The subtle dig at her family's materialistic focus wasn't lost on me. Lily had always been different, more thoughtful, more genuine. In many ways, she reminded me of myself at that age before life had complicated everything. We should talk, David offered. I could tell you about my residency experience, the realities of medical school. It's rewarding, but challenging. I'd like that, Lily replied with unexpected enthusiasm. Watching them, I felt a strange sense of continuity, as if something important was being preserved, despite my children's best efforts to dismantle my legacy. Perhaps the connections that mattered most weren't the ones defined by DNA after all. Grandma Lily said, turning back to me, I brought you something. She pulled a small photo album from her backpack. I rescued it from the boxes Uncle Daniel was packing up from your condo. I thought you might want to keep it. She placed it in my lap, and I recognized it immediately, the small blue album where I'd kept photos of Sarah and me throughout our 40-year friendship. Sarah at my wedding, me at her son's birth. Both of us arms around each other at her 50th birthday, a year before her diagnosis. Sarah thin, but smiling during chemo, my hand clasping hers, tears welled in my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. David peered at the album, his expression softening. I haven't seen some of these in years. Mom kept the same ones. He pointed to a photo of Sarah and me on the beach, both in our 30s, laughing as waves crashed around our knees, the very beach where the contested house stood. She loved that place, David said quietly, even before you owned it. Remember how we used to rent the cottage 3 houses down every summer? Mom would say someday she'd have her own place there. I nodded, memory washing over me. That's why we bought it, for her to visit when she got sick. Wanted her to have peaceful place. Lily was listening intently, absorbing this history she'd never heard. So the beach house was special to Sarah too. Very, I confirmed. After diagnosis, she stayed there. Last summer of her life, David swallowed hard. It was the last place she felt truly happy. When you transferred it to me after she died, it meant everything, not just financially, but emotionally. My children never knew her like I did. I explained to Lily, never understood our friendship because they never asked. Lily concluded quietly. They just assumed it was their inheritance. They're right, yes. I reached for Lily's hand. You different see beyond possessions. She squeezed my fingers gently. I should go before Mom wonders where I am, but I'll come back tomorrow. After she left, David helped me look through more of the album, each photo unlocking memories, camping trips with our young children, holiday celebrations, Sarah standing as godmother at Vanessa's christening, a role my daughter had apparently forgotten. Your children really have no idea, do they? David asked about everything you and Mom shared about the promises you made to each other. No, I admitted. My fault partly protected them too much, never showed them real world. And now they're selling off your life without a second thought. There was no judgment in his tone, only sadness. Not everything I corrected. A small smile forming. Beach house just beginning. Wait until they try to access bank accounts. David raised an eyebrow. You have more surprises in store. Many, I confirmed. Richard and I planned carefully, suspected this might happen someday. You knew your own children would try to liquidate your assets while you were hospitalized. The disbelief in his voice was palpable. Hoped not, I clarified, prepared just in case. Richard saw signs. Their focus on money possessions, worried what would happen if I was alone. David shook his head slowly. And they think you were the financially naive one. As evening approached, Harold arrived with documents for me to review. Papers that would make my recovery official, my competency, established my authority over my own affairs restored. The neurologist will evaluate you tomorrow, he explained. Once he confirms your cognitive functions are intact, we can file these immediately. I nodded gratefully. And the other matter in progress? Harold assured me. The funds are secure. Your children cannot access them without the proper documentation which only you possess. Good, I settled back against the pillows, exhaustion creeping in, but determination burning bright. Let them sell what they can, each sale one step closer to the truth. Harold patted my hand gently. Rest now, Victoria. The pieces are in motion. As I drifted toward sleep that night, I thought of Richard, of the conversations we'd had during his final months. How he'd worried about our children's values, about the legacy we would leave. How we'd agreed that true inheritance wasn't measured in property or bank accounts, but in lessons learned and wisdom gained. Our children had missed those lessons. Perhaps in my imperfect way, I could still teach them, even if the education came through loss rather than love. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect Southern California day that usually lifted my spirits. But as I sat in the wheelchair by my hospital window, a heaviness pressed against my chest that had nothing to do with my medical condition. Today was the estate sale at my condo. Today, strangers would pick through my possessions, haggling over prices, walking away with pieces of my life clutched in their hands. "Are you sure you want to do this?" David asked, standing behind my wheelchair. "It's not too late to stop it." I shook my head firmly. "Need to see? Need to know." Dr. Patel had cleared me for a brief outing, 4 hours maximum, with David, a trained medical professional, accompanying me. My children knew nothing of this approval, nothing of my planned visit to the very sale they had organized. "Your blood pressure," David reminded me. "If you get too upset, I'll be fine," I assured him, my speech improving daily with therapy. "Just observe, no confrontation, not yet." He didn't look convinced, but nodded anyway. "Harold will meet us there, and Lily knows we're coming." The hospital discharge was surprisingly simple. Within 30 minutes, I was settled in David's rental car, a pillow supporting my weaker side, heading toward the coastal condo that had been my home since Richard's death. As we approached my neighborhood, I noticed the signs, first neon posters with black arrows, the words "estate sale." Everything must go in garish lettering, like a liquidation at a failing business, like my life was being cleared out for inventory. "Vulgar," I murmured. David's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "We don't have to do this." "Yes, I insisted we do." He parked a block away to avoid the cluster of cars already lining my street. As he helped me into the wheelchair, I caught sight of a woman walking away from my building, carrying Richard's antique chess set, the one his father had given him, the one he'd planned to pass to his first grandchild. I swallowed hard, forcing down the wave of grief that threatened to overwhelm me. David wheeled me slowly toward the condo building, where a small crowd had gathered in the lobby. Most were strangers clutching coffee cups and numbered tickets waiting for their turn to enter. Estate sale vultures, I'd always called them. The regulars who showed up early, who knew the best items, would go first. We joined the line, David pulling my sun hat lower over my face. No one gave us a second glance, just another elderly woman in a wheelchair, perhaps looking for bargains like everyone else. When our number was called, we entered the elevator to my floor. As the doors opened on the 12th story, the sounds hit me first. Voices haggling drawers, opening and closing, the particular rustle of people examining items that don't belong to them. Then the sight, my front door standing open, strangers wandering freely through rooms that had been my private sanctuary. And in the center of it all, Vanessa and Daniel overseeing the dismantling of my life with clipboards and calculating eyes. "Price check on the silver service," someone called. "800 for the set," Daniel replied without hesitation. "But we'll take 7 if you're buying today. $700 for the Georgian silver that had been in Richard's family for 4 generations. The service we'd agreed would go to Robert's children when they married." A middle-aged woman held up my cream cashmere sweater. "How much for this?" $40, Vanessa answered, barely glancing up from her clipboard. "All clothing is as marked." My favorite sweater, the one Richard had given me our last Christmas together, now reduced to a price tag in a stranger's hands. David squeezed my shoulder gently. "We can leave," he whispered. I shook my head, forcing myself to breathe evenly. This was why I had come to witness, to remember, to fuel the resolve that would carry me through what was to come. We moved through the crowded rooms, unnoticed in the general bustle. In my bedroom, a woman was trying on my jewelry, holding up earrings to her reflection in my vanity mirror. In Richard's study, now emptied of his books, A man was measuring the antique desk for transport. It was in the living room that we finally encountered Lily, who was standing guard over a small stack of photo albums and personal papers. Her eyes widened when she saw us, but she quickly composed her expression, giving only the slightest nod of acknowledgement. "These items aren't for sale," she was explaining firmly to an insistent customer. "Family historical documents." "But everything has a price," the woman argued. "What if I gave you 100 for the lot, not for sale at any price?" Lily repeated her tone, brooking no argument. I felt a surge of pride for my granddaughter's quiet strength. "What's the holdup here?" Daniel approached, frowning at the interaction. "This lady wants to buy Grandma's personal papers and photos," Lily explained. "I told her they're not for sale." Daniel sighed impatiently. "Lily, we discussed this. Anything we're keeping has already been removed." "Everything else goes." "These are her private journals," Lily protested. "Her letters from Grandpa during the war, her parents' naturalization papers. You can't just sell these to strangers." "Fine," Daniel conceded with obvious irritation. "Put them in my car, but everything else is priced to move." He turned to the customer. "We have some lovely first editions in the den that might interest you instead." As Daniel led the woman away, Lily finally made eye contact with us, mouthing, "Follow me," before picking up the stack of preserved items and heading toward the kitchen. In the relative privacy of the empty pantry, Lily set down her precious cargo and embraced me carefully. "Grandma, I can't believe you're here. Are you okay?" "Managing," I assured her. "Needed to see with my own eyes." "It's horrible," Lily whispered, tears threatening. "They're selling everything, even things I know meant something special to you." "I've tried to save what I could, but you've done wonderfully," I interrupted, patting her hand. "Some things just things. Others," I gestured to the stack of albums and papers she'd protected. "Those matter. Mom found the safe in your closet." Lily continued urgently, "But she couldn't open it. They're bringing someone this afternoon to drill it." David and I exchanged glances. The safe contained the documentation we needed, the proof of the trust accounts, the arrangement with David, the conditions Richard and I had established years ago. "Harold has copies," David assured me. "Everything is legally protected." I nodded, though unease settled in my stomach. The safe also contained personal items, letters between Richard and me that were meant for no one else's eyes, the original deed to the beach house with Sarah's name mentioned in the transfer notes, explaining our reasons. "What's going on in here?" Vanessa's voice cut through our whispered conversation as she appeared in the pantry doorway. Her eyes widened as she registered my presence. "Mom, what the hell are you doing here?" "Visiting." "My home," I replied calmly, "while it's still mine." Vanessa's gaze darted to David, then back to me, comprehension dawning. "You checked yourself out of the hospital. Are you insane? You had a stroke." "Doctor approved," I said simply. "Short visit. And you—" Vanessa turned on Lily. "You knew about this. You've been conspiring behind our backs. Someone needed to look out for Grandma's interests." Lily replied, chin raised defiantly. Vanessa's face flushed with anger. "Daniel," she called sharply. "You need to get in here. Now." Within moments, Daniel appeared, stopping short at the sight of me in the wheelchair. "Mom, what's going on?" "Apparently," Vanessa said icily, "Mom has checked herself out of the hospital to spy on us with the help of her friend's son and our daughter." Daniel's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. "How long have you been here?" "Long enough," I replied. "Seen everything. I needed to see." "Mom, you don't understand." He began, his tone conciliatory. "This is all for your benefit. We're liquidating assets to pay for your long-term care." "The doctors said—" "Liar," I interrupted, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "Doctors said good prognosis. You never asked, never wanted to know." An uncomfortable silence fell over the pantry, broken only by the sounds of the ongoing sale in the other rooms. Strangers exclaiming over fines, cash registers beeping, my life being parceled out piece by piece. "I think," David said quietly, "it's time we left. This has been enough excitement for one day." I nodded, suddenly feeling the fatigue of emotion and physical exertion. But as David turned my wheelchair, I looked back at my children one last time. "Enjoy the sale," I said softly. "Everything has a price, even lessons about consequences." As we left the condo, I heard Daniel calling after us, demanding answers, explanations. But I didn't turn around. I had seen what I came to see. My children had shown me exactly who they were, and I had shown them in my quiet way that I was still very much alive and watching. The hospital room felt different when I returned, less like a prison, more like a temporary command center. Dr. Patel had been informed of my outing, and after checking my vitals seemed impressed rather than concerned. "Your blood pressure is actually lower than before you left," he noted, reviewing the monitors. "Sometimes confronting our fears is better than lying here imagining the worst." "Not fears," I corrected him. "Realities." He smiled sympathetically. "Well, whatever they were, facing them seems to have done you good. Your speech is markedly improved, too." After he left, Harold arrived, his normally unflappable demeanor showing signs of strain. "They've opened the safe," he announced without preamble. I had expected this, but the news still sent a cold ripple through me. When, about an hour ago, a locksmith drilled it open, Daniel has the contents. David, who had stepped out to get coffee, returned in time to hear this. "All of it, the trust documents, the letters." Harold nodded grimly. "Everything. He called me immediately, demanding an explanation. He's on his way here now." I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. "Good. Time for truth." "Victoria," Harold cautioned, "he's extremely agitated. Perhaps we should postpone this confrontation until you're stronger." "No more postponing," I said firmly. "No more secrets." We didn't have long to wait. Less than 20 minutes later, Daniel burst into my room, a folder clutched in his hand. His face flushed with anger. Robert trailed behind him, looking uncomfortable and out of place. "What the hell is this?" Daniel demanded, waving the folder. "Some kind of trust that gives half your estate to this outsider, conditions that we have to fulfill to receive our inheritance." "Were you planning to tell us any of this before we embarrassed ourselves, trying to sell property that apparently isn't even ours?" I regarded my eldest son calmly. Sitting would be better. Long conversation. He remained standing, vibrating with indignation, but Robert sank into a chair by the window, looking relieved to be off his feet. "I don't need to sit," Daniel snapped. "I need explanations. This document says the beach house legally belongs to David Mitchell. It says our trust fund distributions are contingent on demonstrated financial responsibility and community service. It says you've been setting aside money every month for years to support him through medical school. Our family money. My money." I corrected gently. "My choice. Dad would never have agreed to this insanity." "Your father co-signed every document," I replied. "His idea, many of them." Daniel looked as if I'd slapped him. "That's not possible. Dad believed in family first. Always." "Yes," I agreed, "but family more than blood. Sarah was my family. David became our family, too." Robert finally spoke, his voice quiet. "Mom, why didn't you tell us all these years?" "Would you have understood?" I asked, the question genuine rather than accusatory. "When we helped Sarah with David's college tuition, you all objected. Called it waste. Because he wasn't related to us," Daniel interjected. "Because he needed it," I countered. "Your father and I watched you all, growing entitled, taking for granted. Your privilege caring more about things than people." Robert flinched visibly at this assessment. "So this was some kind of test." Daniel's voice dripped with sarcasm. "And apparently we failed. So you decided to give away our inheritance to teach us a lesson. Not all," I clarified. "Proportional. You still receive substantial amounts. If," I emphasized the word, "you fulfill conditions. Community service, financial responsibility evaluations. We're not children, Mom." "Then stop acting like them," I replied simply. Robert leaned forward. "These conditions, what exactly do they involve?" Harold stepped in his legal training, making the complex document more accessible. Each of you would need to complete 500 hours of community service at approved organizations, demonstrate responsible financial management for a period of 18 months, and participate in philanthropic planning. "This is ridiculous," Daniel sputtered. "We have careers, families. We don't have time for charity work." I found time. I reminded him working full-time, raising 3 children still volunteered, hospital literacy program women's shelter. "That was different," he dismissed. "You were a housewife. You had flexibility." I felt rather than saw David stiffen behind me, but he maintained his professional composure. "Daniel," Harold interjected, "regardless of how you feel about the conditions, they are legally binding. The trust was established 7 years ago with your father's full participation and consent. The documentation is extensive and clear. We'll challenge it," Daniel threatened. "Undue influence diminished capacity. Your father was president of his company. When he signed, I reminded him, I was on 3 boards, good luck, proving diminished capacity." Robert ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that my heart clenched. "What about the monthly payments to David? Those are still ongoing." I nodded. "Until his residency completes. 2 more years." "Why?" Robert asked, and unlike Daniel's demanding tone, his seemed genuinely confused. "Why him and not, I don't know any of the other people you knew?" It was the first thoughtful question any of my children had asked, and I answered it honestly. "Sarah saved my life." "Once," I said quietly. "Literal, not figurative. Pulled me from car after accident. Stayed with me hospital 3 days, never left my side. Richard traveling. You children too young to remember." This was clearly news to both of them. "When she got sick, promised I'd do same for her," I continued. "Cancer took her, but I could still help her son keep my promise." Robert absorbed this silently while Daniel paced the small room. "And the beach house?" Robert finally asked. "Why give him that specifically? Sarah loved it there," I explained. "Last place, she was happy. David spent summers nearby as child. Richard and I decided right thing. Give David security. Let him focus becoming doctor like his father." "You could have just set up a normal trust for him," Daniel argued, "not given away our family vacation home." "Not really family home," I pointed out. "You visited twice in 5 years. Too busy working traveling. Only Lily came regularly with me." Another uncomfortable truth they couldn't refute. "What about the condo?" Daniel demanded. "Is that even yours to sell? Or have you given that away too?" "Condo is mine," I confirmed, "but proceeds not yours to spend. Medical trust established for my care." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Of course. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Controlled everything from your hospital bed while we've been running ourselves ragged, trying to manage your affairs." "Affairs didn't need managing," I said calmly. "I wasn't dying, wasn't incapacitated permanently. You assumed, never asked doctors, never asked me. The truth of this hung in the air between us." Robert stood suddenly. "I need some time to process this." He turned to Harold. "The estate sale. What happens to that money? It must be placed in escrow," Harold replied. "Since the sale was conducted without proper authorization, the funds cannot be distributed until Mrs. Sullivan provides written consent." "Of course," Daniel muttered. "More control." He turned to leave, the folder still clutched in his hand, but paused at the door. "This isn't over, Mom. You can't manipulate us like this. We're not charity cases you can reform with your conditions and your tests." After they left, the room fell silent, except for the steady beep of monitors. David sighed heavily. "That went about as well as expected," he observed. "Better than I feared," I replied. Robert listened, actually heard some of it. Harold gathered his briefcase. "I'll file the paperwork, confirming your competency tomorrow. Once that's done, you'll regain full control of your accounts and medical decisions." After he left, David pulled a chair closer to my bed. "Are you really okay? That was intense." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief despite the confrontation. Truth finally out. "No more pretending. They're still selling your things," he reminded me gently. "Just things," I replied, surprising myself with how little it suddenly mattered. "What's important preserved." I patched his hand. "Sarah would be so proud of you." His eyes brightened with unshed tears. "I hope so. I'm trying to live up to her example and yours. As evening settled over the hospital, I found myself thinking not of what I had lost that day, but what had been revealed. The true character of my children, the strength of my granddaughter, the fulfillment of a promise made long ago. The beach house was safe. David's future was secure. And my children faced a choice that would reveal once and for all what they truly valued. The confrontation has begun. Will Victoria's children accept the terms of their inheritance or fight against their mother's wishes? What other revelations await this fractured family? Subscribe now for the next chapter of this compelling story about promises, betrayal, and the true meaning of legacy. Sunday brought an unexpected visitor. I was finishing my morning physical therapy when Robert appeared in the doorway alone and bearing a small potted orchid. "Mom," he greeted me awkwardly, hovering at the threshold. "Is this a good time?" I nodded, gesturing to the chair beside my bed. Jenny, my therapist, gave me an encouraging smile as she gathered her equipment. "You're making wonderful progress, Mrs. Sullivan," she said. "Keep practicing those exercises, and we might discuss discharge planning by the end of the week." After she left, Robert placed the orchid on my bedside table. "It's from your condo," he admitted. "I rescued it before it could be sold. I remember Dad gave it to you for your anniversary. The simple gesture caught me off guard. Of all the possessions being liquidated, he had thought to save a living thing that required care and attention. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "Very thoughtful." Robert sat looking more like the boy I remembered than the man who had stood silently by while his siblings divided my possessions. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything you said yesterday. About Sarah, about David, about the conditions in the trust." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I looked up some old family photos last night," he said. "Found one from my 10th birthday. Sarah was there helping you serve cake. I'd completely forgotten she was part of those moments." "She was always there," I confirmed. "For every important day when you broke your arm, she drove us to emergency room. When Vanessa had chickenpox, she stayed nights helping me care for all of you." Robert nodded slowly. "I don't remember much of that. I guess kids don't notice the adults who make their lives possible. Natural," I assured him. "Children self-centered by nature." "But adults should grow beyond that." He winced slightly at the gentle rebuke. "I'm trying to understand, Mom. The beach house, the trust conditions, all of it. Daniel's furious talking about lawyers and challenges. Vanessa's not speaking to anyone, but I keep thinking about what you said, that we never even asked about your prognosis. And you're right. We just assumed the worst and started distributing your life." The admission hung between us. Honest and painful. "Why?" I asked simply. "Why assume I was done?" Robert looked down at his hands. "I don't know. It's terrible to say out loud. I think it was easier to think of you as already gone, to not have to face what we were doing." His honesty was startling and healing in its way. "The trust conditions," he continued, 500 hours of community service. That's what 12 weeks full-time or a year of weekends. Approximately, I agreed. "Not impossible." "No," he conceded. "Not impossible at all." He hesitated. "I called the community center near my house this morning. They need help with their literacy program. I signed up for orientation next Saturday." Tears pricked my eyes unexpectedly. "Robert, I'm not saying I agree with everything," he added quickly. "The beach house still feels like it should have been discussed with us, but the conditions. Maybe Dad and you were right. Maybe we have lost sight of certain values. Privilege easy to take for granted," I said softly. "Your father and I worked so hard, give you opportunities, but perhaps made it too easy." "Daniel doesn't see it that way," Robert warned. "He's convinced you've been manipulated by David, by Harold, by anyone except your own judgment. He's determined to break the trust. His choice," I replied. "Consequences also his." We talked for nearly an hour, the longest real conversation I'd had with my youngest son in years. He asked about Sarah, about our friendship, about the promises we'd made to each other. For the first time, he seemed genuinely interested in my life as something more than an extension of his childhood. As he prepared to leave, he hesitated. "Mom, there's something else you should know. Daniel found some papers in your safe, investment records, account numbers. He's been making calls trying to access those funds." My heart sank. Without authorization, Robert nodded uncomfortably. He's convinced himself it's for your benefit, for your care, but using my money. Without permission is theft, I finished for him. Or, even from one's mother. I told him as much, Robert admitted. That's partly why he's not speaking to me either. After he left, I called Harold immediately, alerting him to Daniel's activities. His response was swift and decisive. Additional security measures on all accounts, notifications to the financial institutions, acceleration of the competency filing. It will be handled by end of business tomorrow, Harold assured me. He won't be able to access anything. I thanked him, then sat in the quiet of my hospital room, contemplating the fractures in my family that seemed to be widening rather than healing. Daniel desperate to seize control, Vanessa retreating into silent resentment, Robert hesitantly reaching toward understanding. In the afternoon, Lily arrived with David, both carrying coffee and wearing expressions that suggested news. "Grandma," Lily began immediately, "Uncle Daniel came to our house this morning. He tried to convince Mom that you're being manipulated by David, that he's after your money." "Vanessa's response?" I asked. "She actually defended you," Lily said, sounding surprised herself. "She told him that whatever your reasons, they were your choice to make. That selling your things while you were hospitalized was wrong, even if they thought it was for your benefit. This was unexpected. Vanessa, of all people, drawing a line. She's still upset," Lily clarified, seeing my expression. "But I think seeing you at the estate sale, realizing you were aware and watching them, it affected her." "And there's more," David added. "Daniel apparently contacted the hospital administration, trying to suggest I've been unduly influencing you, that I shouldn't be allowed to visit because I'm not family." "Ridiculous," I said firmly. Dr. Patel shut it down completely, David continued. "He informed Daniel that as your physician, he's observed no cognitive impairment that would make you susceptible to influence, and that you've made your wishes regarding visitors very clear. I made a mental note to thank Dr. Patel for his support. Also," Lily added, glancing at David, "I've been talking with David about medical school, about what it takes, the commitment involved. It's helping me decide if it's really the path I want. And," I prompted, noticing the light in her eyes. "I think it is," she said with quiet determination. "I want to help people make a difference like David is doing, like you did with your volunteer work." Pride swelled in my chest, not just at her ambition, but at her reasons, not money or status, but service and purpose. "Your mother knows?" I asked. Lily nodded. "I told her last night. She was surprisingly supportive. Said if that's what I really want, she'll help me prepare for the MCAT next year." Another small shift, another unexpected response. Perhaps the earthquake of revelations was rearranging more than just property rights. As we talked through the afternoon, a plan began to form in my mind. The divisions in my family would not heal overnight, might never fully mend, but perhaps there was a way forward then, that acknowledged both the pain and the possibility of growth. "David," I said as they prepared to leave, "I need one more favor. When I'm discharged, want to visit Beach House. See it one more time." "Of course," he agreed immediately. "It's still your house too, Victoria." The lifetime usage rights were very clear in the agreement. "Not just visit," I clarified. "Want family meeting there, all of them." David and Lily exchanged glances. "Are you sure that's wise?" David asked gently. "Daniel's actions suggest he's escalating, not calming down." "Necessary," I insisted. "Final confrontation, all cards on table." As they left, I turned to the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Tomorrow would bring discharge planning, the formal restoration of my legal competency, the first steps toward reclaiming my independence, but the true healing of my family of old wounds and new betrayals that would require more than legal documents and medical clearances. That would require courage, honesty, and perhaps a setting that reminded us all of what really mattered. The beach house waited, its windows facing the endless horizon, its walls holding decades of memories, both joyful and painful, the perfect place for endings and beginning. 5 days later, I stood on my own 2 feet, at the hospital entrance, leaning only slightly on a cane as David brought his car around. Dr. Patel had pronounced my recovery remarkable and cleared me for discharge with outpatient therapy 3 times weekly. "Remember to pace yourself," he cautioned, reviewing my medication schedule one final time. You've made extraordinary progress, but stroke recovery is a marathon, not a sprint. Understood, I assured him. No marathons for now. He smiled, shaking my hand warmly. It's been a privilege, Mrs. Sullivan. You've reminded me why I became a doctor in the first place. As David helped me into the passenger seat, I took a deep breath of fresh air, my first taste of true freedom in nearly a month. The world seemed sharper somehow, colors more vibrant, sounds more distinct. Perhaps it was simply the contrast with the sterile hospital environment, or perhaps it was the heightened awareness that comes with nearly losing everything. Where to? David asked, sliding behind the wheel. Your condo or beach house, I replied without hesitation. Called ahead. Harold meeting us there, Lily too. And your children? He asked carefully. Invited. All three. Don't know. Who will come? The drive to Malibu took nearly an hour in midday traffic. I spent it watching the familiar landscape pass by, marveling at how simultaneously unchanged and different everything seemed. The stroke had altered more than my body. It had shifted my perspective, clarified priorities I hadn't examined in years. As we turned onto the coastal highway, the ocean came into view. Endless blue stretching to the horizon, waves crashing against rocky shores. I felt my shoulders relax, a tension I hadn't realized I was carrying, slowly dissipating. I forget sometimes, David said, noticing my expression, how beautiful it is here. Boston has its charms, but this... He gestured toward the panoramic vista. Why Sarah loved it, I agreed. Healing place. We rounded the final curve, and there it stood, the beach house. 2 stories of weathered cedar and glass, perched on the bluff, its wide deck extending toward the ocean like an outstretched hand. So many memories lived within those walls. Richard teaching the children to play chess on rainy afternoons, Sarah and I sharing wine and secrets on the deck at sunset, Lily building sandcastles with her grandfather on the private beach below. And now parked in the circular drive, 3 cars waited. Harold's sensible sedan, Lily's compact, and to my surprise, both Robert's SUV and Vanessa's luxury coupe. Only Daniel's vehicle was missing. All but one, I murmured. David nodded. Are you ready for this? As I'll ever be. He helped me from the car and up the wooden steps to the deck. The front door stood open, sea breeze carrying voices from within. Some tense, others conciliatory. Lily spotted us first, rushing to embrace me carefully. Grandma, you look so much better. Feel better, I assured her, returning the hug. The others turned at our entrance. Harold nodded in greeting. Robert stood awkwardly by the fireplace, and Vanessa surprisingly approached to offer a stiff but seemingly genuine kiss on my cheek. You should have told us you were being discharged today, she said, her tone more concerned than accusatory. We would have helped. Needed. To do this my way, I explained. On my terms. Yes, Vanessa replied with unexpected insight. I'm beginning to understand that about you. I moved slowly to my favorite armchair, by the picture window, settling into its familiar embrace. From this vantage point, I could see everyone in the living room while gazing out at the ocean beyond, a position of both connection and perspective. Thank you for coming, I began, my voice stronger each day with therapy, especially here of all places. Daniel refused, Robert said bluntly. Said he wouldn't participate in, quote, this charade of manipulation and theft. He's meeting with another lawyer today. I nodded, unsurprised, but disappointed nonetheless. His choice. But I'm glad the rest of you came. Why here, Mom? Vanessa asked, perching on the sofa's edge. Why bring us to the very house you gave away? Because this house holds truth, I replied simply. About family, about promises, about what really matters. I gestured to Harold, who opened his briefcase and removed a folder. Before we begin legal matters first, my competency officially established. Control of all accounts returned to me. Estate sale proceeds in escrow until I determine their distribution. Vanessa and Robert exchanged glances, but didn't object. Now I continued, I want to tell you a story about Sarah, about this house, about why it belongs to David now. For the next half hour, I spoke more than I had since the stroke, recounting the 40-year friendship that my children had witnessed but never truly understood. how Sarah had stood by me through Richard's military deployment, through miscarriages and health scares, through the challenging years of raising 3 strong-willed children, how I had supported her through divorce, single parenthood, and finally the devastating cancer diagnosis. When Sarah knew she was dying, I explained her greatest fear wasn't death itself, it was leaving David without support. His father long gone, no siblings, no extended family. She asked you to look after him. Robert guessed, his expression thoughtful. Yes, but more than that, she asked me to help him become the doctor he dreamed of being, like his father, a dream that required years of education, expensive education. So you helped with tuition, Vanessa acknowledged. We knew that part. What we didn't understand was why this level of commitment to someone outside our family. Because Sarah was family, I said firmly. Different kind, but no less real. She saved my life once literally, pulled me from burning car after accident, stayed by my side hospital 3 days straight. I could see this revelation landing differently now than it had with Daniel and Robert earlier. Vanessa's expression softened slightly. Richard and I decided Beach House would provide security. Allow David focus on medical training, not financial stress. His name on deed meant he could borrow against it if needed. But we retained lifetime usage rights. Nothing really changed except paper ownership. Except everything changed, Vanessa pointed out. Because you never told us. You let us believe it would be ours someday. Fair criticism, I acknowledged. Perhaps should have been more transparent. But your reactions to helping with tuition didn't inspire confidence. You called it waste of family resources. No one could deny this truth. The trust conditions, Robert interjected. The community service requirements. Why structure our inheritance that way? I turned to him with appreciation for the direct question. Because money without purpose or perspective can damage as easily as help. Your father and I wanted more for you than just financial security. Wanted you to experience giving back, finding meaning beyond possessions. I've started, Robert said quietly. The literacy program. It's actually rewarding, helping adults learn to read seeing their progress. I didn't expect to enjoy it. Pride warmed my chest at this small but significant step. I looked into the women's shelter program, Vanessa admitted unexpectedly, the one you volunteered with for years. They need help with their financial literacy workshops, teaching budgeting credit management. I thought maybe my skills could be useful there. The surprise must have shown on my face because she added defensively, I'm not saying I agree with all of this, but I'm considering the conditions testing the waters. It was more than I had dared hope for. David, who had remained silent throughout, finally spoke. I want you all to know something. When your mother transferred the beach house to me, it came with her own conditions that it remain available to your family, that any significant decisions about its use or potential sale would include consultation with all of you. She never intended to cut you out of this place or its memories. Is that true? Robert asked me directly. I nodded. This house meant for happiness, for healing, for bringing people together, not driving them apart. As if to emphasize my words, the setting sun broke through cloud cover, sending golden light streaming through the windows, illuminating the room in a warm glow. For a moment we all sat in silence, absorbing the beauty, and perhaps I hoped the deeper meaning of this place that had become the center of our conflict. I miss Dad, Vanessa said suddenly, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. Being here, I can almost feel him, his presence. Me too, Robert agreed softly. He would be so proud of you both, I told them, for being here, for listening, for trying to understand. The moment of connection was fragile but real, a tentative bridge across the chasm that had opened between us, not complete, not with Daniel's absence, and the wounds still fresh, but a beginning. Outside, waves crashed against the shore in their eternal rhythm, reminding us that some things remained constant, even as others changed forever. The peace of our family gathering shattered with the sound of tires on gravel. Through the front windows, we watched Daniel's luxury sedan skid to a stop in the circular drive, his movements jerky with anger as he slammed the car door and strode toward the house. This should be interesting, Vanessa murmured, straightening as if preparing for battle. I gripped my cane tighter. Let him speak, hear him out. Daniel burst through the open doorway, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled, his eyes darting from face to face before settling on me with laser focus. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he said, voice tight with controlled fury. The whole family gathered at our beach house. Oh, wait, not our beach house anymore. Mom gave it away to a stranger. "Daniel," Robert began, "if you'd just listen." "I've heard enough," Daniel cut him off. "While you've all been sitting here getting manipulated, I've been doing actual research." He brandished a folder similar to the one Harold had brought. "Found some very interesting things about the timing of this property transfer." He approached, towering over my seated figure. The beach house was transferred to David Mitchell 8 years ago, just months after Dad's first cancer diagnosis. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say, when he was vulnerable, when you both knew he might not survive. A cold silence fell over the room. Even Vanessa looked shocked at the accusation. "That's enough," David said quietly, stepping forward. "You're upset, I understand, but that crosses a line. Stay out of this," Daniel snapped. "You're the beneficiary of all this manipulation. Of course you'd defend it." I raised my hand, silencing further interruptions. "Let him finish. Say your piece, Daniel." He seemed momentarily thrown by my calm acceptance, but quickly recovered. "The trust conditions the property transfer. All of it happened when Dad was sick, when he wasn't thinking clearly, when you were making decisions for both of you. The lawyer I spoke with today says we have grounds to challenge everything based on Dad's diminished capacity at the time." Harold stirred from his corner. That would be extremely difficult to prove, given the extensive documentation and multiple witnesses to Richard's competency at the time of signing. "We'll see about that," Daniel retorted. "And there's more. I've been going through financial records. Mom has been sending money to David monthly for years, thousands of dollars diverted from our family's resources." "My resources," I corrected quietly. "My choice." "Dad would never have approved," Daniel insisted. "Not of giving away a family property, not of these ridiculous conditions on our inheritance." I studied my eldest son, the tight line of his jaw, the defensive posture, the absolute certainty in his eyes. In many ways, he reminded me of myself at his age, stubborn, convinced of my own righteousness, unable to see beyond my narrow perspective. "Sit down, Daniel," I said, my voice surprisingly strong and steady. "There's something you need to see." He hesitated, then grudgingly took a seat across from me, as far from David as possible. I nodded to Harold, who removed a sealed envelope from his briefcase and handed it to me. I was saving this for last resort, hoped we wouldn't need it. With slightly trembling fingers, I broke the seal and removed a DVD in a clear case. Richard made this 6 months before he died, asked me to keep it unless absolutely necessary. "What is it?" Robert asked. "Your father's speaking directly to you about all of this." Daniel scoffed. "Convenient another fabrication to support your story." "Let's watch it," Vanessa suggested, her voice neutral. "If it's Dad, we'll know." Harold set up his laptop on the coffee table, inserting the disc. After a moment of loading, Richard's face appeared on the screen, thinner than in his healthy days, but clear-eyed and alert, sitting in his study at home. "Hello, children," he began, his familiar voice filling the room. "If you're watching this, it means your mother has felt it necessary to share some difficult truths with you. I had hoped this recording would never be needed, that you would accept her decisions with grace and understanding. But knowing you as I do," a wry smile crossed his face, "I suspected you might need to hear this directly from me." Daniel leaned forward despite himself, eyes fixed on his father's image. "First, let me be absolutely clear," Richard continued. "Every decision regarding our estate planning, the beach house transfer to David Mitchell, the trust conditions, all of it was done with my full knowledge, participation, and enthusiastic support. In fact, many of these ideas were mine originally." He shifted in his chair, expression growing more serious. "I've watched with increasing concern as you've grown into adulthood. You've achieved professional success, financial stability, all the things your mother and I hoped for you. But somewhere along the way, something essential seems to have been lost. The values we tried to instill, compassion, generosity, perspective, have been overshadowed by materialism and entitlement." Daniel's face flushed, but he remained silent. "The beach house decision came after much thought. Sarah Mitchell was family to us in all but blood. When she faced her own cancer battle, your mother and I promised to see David through his education. The property transfer provided him security while ensuring he could focus on becoming the doctor he was meant to be. It was the right thing to do, both practically and morally. Richard leaned closer to the camera. As for the trust conditions, consider them a final lesson from your father. Money without purpose destroys more lives than it enhances. I've seen it happen throughout my career. Inherited wealth without responsibility or perspective leading to emptiness and dysfunction. I want better for you. His expression softened. I love you all more than you can know. This isn't punishment, it's protection. The greatest gift I can give you isn't financial security, but the opportunity to discover what truly matters. Your mother has honored my wishes perfectly. Any anger you feel should be directed at me, not her. The recording ended with Richard's gentle smile, frozen on the screen for a moment before fading to black. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant sound of waves against the shore. Daniel stood abruptly, walking to the window with his back to the room. His shoulders were rigid, hands clenched at his sides. "Daniel," I called softly. "I need some air," he muttered, pushing through the door to the deck without looking back. Robert wiped moisture from his eyes. That was hard to watch, but it was Dad, unmistakably Dad. Every word, every mannerism, Vanessa agreed quietly. No one could fake that. I watched Daniel through the window, standing at the deck railing, facing the ocean as darkness began to fall. His posture spoke of conflict, of a worldview being forcibly realigned. Give him time, I suggested, hardest for him to accept, most invested in his version of events. Why is he so resistant? Lily asked, speaking up for the first time since Daniel's arrival. Uncle Robert and Mom are at least trying to understand. Pride, David offered thoughtfully. Speaking as someone who's seen this in patients' families, sometimes the person who reacts most strongly is the one who recognizes themselves most clearly in the criticism. I nodded slowly. Daniel always most like Richard. Same drive, same certainty. Being wrong difficult for both. As the last light faded from the sky, Daniel remained on the deck, a solitary figure against the darkening horizon. Inside, conversation continued more quietly, with Robert asking David about his medical residency, Vanessa examining old photo albums with Lily, Harold discussing legal details with me. A fragile normalcy had descended, broken only when Daniel finally re-entered, his face composed but eyes revealing inner turmoil. I need to head back to the city, he announced stiffly. Early meeting tomorrow. Daniel, I began, we should talk. Not now, Mom, he interrupted, but without his earlier hostility. I need time to think. It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't rejection either. Something had shifted, however slightly. As he prepared to leave, he paused by David's chair. For what it's worth, my father was a good judge of character. If he approved of you, there must be substance there. It wasn't an apology, but from Daniel, it was significant concession. After he left, the atmosphere lightened noticeably. Vanessa suggested ordering dinner, and to my surprise, everyone agreed to stay. As night fully claimed the sky, the beach house lights glowed warmly against the darkness, voices and occasional laughter spilling from its windows. Not quite the family harmony of years past, but something healing nonetheless. Later, as David helped me to the master bedroom I'd shared with Richard for so many summers, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Not victory, there were no winners or losers in this family reckoning, but progress towards something true and necessary. Do you think he'll come around? David asked, turning down the bed with the practiced efficiency of a doctor. Daniel. Eventually, I replied, on his own terms in his own time. And if he doesn't, if he pursues legal challenges. I smiled slightly. Then we faced that too. Family complicated healing, not linear. As I settled against the pillows, listening to the eternal rhythm of waves below, I thought of Richard, of Sarah, of promises kept and lessons learned. The beach house stood as it always had, bearing witness to both our best and worst moments. A sanctuary not because it was perfect, but because it was real. The confrontation with Daniel brings painful truths and uncertain reconciliation. As Victoria settles back into the beach house, what final revelations await this family's journey? Will Will Daniel choose healing or continued conflict? The story approaches its emotional conclusion in the next chapter. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. 6 months passed, with the steady rhythm of seasons changing. My recovery continued. Physical therapy, twice-weekly speech almost completely restored the cane relegated to a corner most days. The beach house became my primary residence, its peaceful surroundings more conducive to healing than my city condo. Life settled into new patterns. Robert visited most weekends, often bringing his children, who delighted in rediscovering the beach their father had loved as a boy. Vanessa came less frequently, but with growing ease, sometimes staying overnight, our conversations gradually moving beyond pleasantries to something approaching genuine connection. Daniel remained distant, communicating primarily through terse emails and occasional phone calls. He had abandoned his legal challenges after consulting multiple attorneys, all of whom confirmed the solidity of our estate planning. A detente of sorts had been established, not warm, but no longer openly hostile. Lily became a regular fixture, spending every other weekend at the beach house, often bringing textbooks to study for her MCAT preparations. To my delight, she and David had developed a mentor relationship that benefited them both, her providing connection to the family that had once rejected him offering guidance through the challenging pre-medical journey. On a bright October morning, almost exactly 1 year after my stroke, I sat on the deck watching dolphins play in the distance, a light breeze carrying the salt scent of ocean. The doorbell rang and I rose to answer it, surprised to find Daniel standing there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Mom," he greeted me formally. "Is this a good time?" "Always," I replied, stepping back to welcome him. "Coffee?" He nodded, following me to the kitchen, where I moved with comfortable familiarity, preparing 2 cups. We carried them to the deck in silence, settling into adjacent chairs facing the ocean. "You're looking well," he observed after a moment. "Almost back to normal, better than normal," I corrected gently. "Stronger in many ways." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've been doing a lot of thinking this past year about Dad, about the trust conditions, about my reaction to everything." I waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. "I started the community service hours," he said finally, "at a financial literacy program for low-income families, teaching budgeting, investment basics, retirement planning." Surprise and pleasure warmed me. "That's wonderful, Daniel." "It's not what I expected," he admitted. "These people, they work so hard with so little. Knowledge most of us take for granted. How credit works, how to build savings. It's transformative for them. I'm seeing real changes in their lives giving back." "Changes the giver, too," I observed. He nodded slowly. Dad was right about perspective, about what matters. He turned to face me directly. "I'm sorry, Mom, for how I behaved during your illness, for what we tried to do with your things. It was inexcusable." The apology so long awaited was offered simply and directly Daniel's way. "Forgiven," I replied with equal simplicity. "Family, imperfect, all of us." "I met David last week," he continued, surprising me further. "Asked him to lunch, wanted to know about his work, his plans for the future. And he's impressive," Daniel acknowledged. "Dedicated. I can see why Dad approved of him, why you do." Coming from Daniel, this was high praise indeed. "The beach house," he said, gesturing to our surroundings. "I understand now why it belongs to him, what it represents. Part of Sarah's legacy," I agreed, "and now part of ours too." We sat in comfortable silence, watching pelicans dive for fish in the rolling waves. Something had healed between us, not completely, perhaps never completely, but significantly. "I have news," Daniel said eventually. 2 pieces, actually. "Oh, first, I've accepted a board position with the Financial Literacy Foundation. It means cutting back at the firm, but it feels right." I reached over to squeeze his hand. Too moved for words. "Second," he continued, "Amanda and I are expecting, a girl due in February." Joy bloomed in my chest. "Daniel, that's wonderful." A small smile softened his features. "We're thinking of naming her Sarah, if that would be all right with you." Tears sprang to my eyes, unexpected and welcome. More than all right, perfect. When he left that afternoon, our goodbye held none of the tension of recent months. Instead, there was a tentative warmth, a bridge being carefully rebuilt. 2 weeks later, on a crisp autumn day, I hosted a gathering at the beach house, not just family this time, but a purposeful expansion of our circle. David was there, of course, along with Lily Robert and his children, Vanessa, and even Daniel with his wife. But also present were members of the foundation, where Daniel volunteered colleagues from David's hospital, students from Lily's pre-med program. As twilight approached, I clinked my glass for attention. The conversations quieted as everyone turned expectantly. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice clear and strong. "This gathering marks something special. Today we're officially launching the Sarah Mitchell Foundation for Medical Education." David's expression registered surprise. We had discussed the concept, but not the timing or name. "This foundation," I continued, "will provide scholarships for promising students pursuing medical careers with priority given to those who've lost parents or faced similar hardships. Initial funding comes from me, but I'm pleased to announce that all 3 of my children have chosen to contribute as well." I nodded to Daniel, Vanessa, and Robert, who each raised their glasses in acknowledgement. David Mitchell will serve as the Foundation's first director, with my granddaughter Lily as program coordinator while she completes her pre-medical studies. Applause rippled through the gathering as David stepped forward, visibly moved. "I'm overwhelmed," he admitted. "Victoria, this honors my mother's memory in the most meaningful way possible, helping others follow the path she encouraged me to take." He paused, composing himself. "Thank you isn't adequate, but it's all I have." As the celebration continued into evening with lights strung across the deck and laughter carrying on the ocean breeze, I found a quiet moment to slip away to the beach. The sand was cool beneath my feet as I walked toward the water's edge, where waves gently erased footprints with each advancing tide. I thought of Richard, of Sarah, of promises made and kept, of a stroke that could have ended everything, but instead had clarified what truly mattered, of children who had disappointed me deeply and then, in their different ways, found paths toward redemption. The beach house stood illuminated on the bluff above windows glowing with warmth and life. Not my house anymore, not legally, but still home in all the ways that counted. Its ownership had caused such pain and division, yet now it had become a gathering place for healing and new beginnings. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find all 3 of my children approaching across the sand. "Mom, everyone's asking for you," Vanessa said, reaching me first. "David wants to make some kind of toast." "Just needed a moment," I explained, "to appreciate everything." Daniel gestured toward the house. "You've created quite a legacy up there, not the one we expected perhaps, but meaningful." "Not my legacy," I corrected gently. "Ours, all of us, including Sarah, including Richard." Robert offered his arm as we turned back toward the house. "Dad would be proud tonight of all of us, I think." As we walked together along the shore, the tide washing away our footprints behind us, I felt a sense of completion, not perfection. Life offered no such guarantees, but something equally valuable: authenticity, connection, purpose. The inheritance my children had once so desperately sought to claim had been transformed into something far more valuable than property or bank accounts. They were learning in their individual ways what Richard and I had hoped to teach them all along: that true legacy lies not in what we possess, but in what we give. Not in what we claim as ours, but in what we create together, and that some promises once made reshaped not just our lives, but the lives of generations to follow. A ripple effect of compassion and commitment that no betrayal could ultimately diminish. As this story of family betrayal and redemption concludes, we're reminded that true inheritance isn't found in possessions, but in the values we choose to carry forward. Victoria's journey from hospital bed to healing has transformed not just her life, but the lives of everyone around her. Thank you for following this emotional story. If it touched your heart, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful tale of family forgiveness and finding what truly matters.